So today's painting is an evening marsh, a little different than I usually do. I'm coming in with a very limited palette today. I'm going to try to get a moon and a moon's reflection in there and show you how I do that. I'm working primarily with Payne's gray, some cobalt blue, and some ultramarine, tiny bit of ultramarine, um, and burnt sienna, and slight other touches. But basically, it's Payne's gray and the cobalt blue. Obviously, with the moon, I'll come in with a little, probably orange um, touch here and there. I start out as always with my background, getting a wash in and doing a slight wash in the foreground with some pigment. Again, paying attention to the water, the movement of the water with every painting. And in this particular painting, I'm going to be working with the shadow from the moon. So I have to be aware with the pigment in the sky and how it's moving. So I'm going to go back and forth there for a little bit. Here I picked up a little alizarin crimson and Payne's gray to give me a base for some of the marsh area. The paper is slightly wet, and I've come in slightly wet with my brush, my fan brush, and just kind of blending it together with the background. Not too detailed yet, working as I go with my idea of what I want here. And I'll discover in this painting, as I continue it, at the end of this painting, I'm jumping ahead, but I'm not happy with the end result, and I end up going back and modifying it a bit. And that's just life in painting. And oftentimes when I step back from a painting, and if something just nags at me or bothers me, I have to take a minute and think about it, and then go back and play with it a little bit and see what it is that I'm not happy with. And I'll talk about that as the video goes on. Keeping my wash in the foreground going, letting my sky dry a little bit, and bringing some intense Payne's gray and cobalt blue together to start my water in the foreground. It's a nighttime scene, so I'm trying to keep that dark, kind of mysterious night sky and water. Don't often paint nighttime, but the mood hit me today. And of course, I get to work in my favorite color, which is Payne's gray. I think I find any excuse to paint in that. Does anyone else out there like working in Payne's gray? It's my core color. So, I switch my brushes out all the time. Again, keeping in mind my water and how it's dripping and how it's moving. My drafting table is at a slight angle just for viewing, and it does make the water kind of drift to the bottom of the paper, so I have to watch how that drip happens. And sometimes I do need to just lift the paper and move it around to let the water and pigment move around. Coming in with some straight Payne's gray here, a little wet on the brush, letting the water and the pigment on my brush kind of move naturally on the paper to give that misty evening waterway. And now I'm starting to see the direction that the grasses will go. And this is where I had some trouble, was how to keep it kind of loose and not too rigid. And yet I started adding the grasses um, a little bit later, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the that rigid part of it, and I thought it was too choppy. So that's what I'll be modifying at the end a little bit. You see my sky in the background has started to dry, so I'll be able to work that in a little bit. Here I am starting my grasses, just using my fan brush to, you know, I guess start the idea of where they're going to be. And I wasn't quite sure of the look, and that's art right there. You try things, sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. And I'm sure most of you have seen that. I come in with a few different brushes trying to get that look, and nothing seemed to satisfy me with that, though I plugged along with this piece and just kept trying new things to see. But I felt like almost I had an island sitting there in the right corner, and I just didn't like it. And my strip of marsh that I'm working on right there was the same thing. Something about it was just not pleasing me. So I carried on and just kept going in that area. And I think the more I worked it, the more I didn't like what I was doing there. So I started to add a little more pigment, thinking that might help the piece. But nothing seemed to satisfy me on that. Obviously, adding some of the moonlight to that moon and the shadow and its reflection. Again, just the preliminary color on that will change quite a bit as I go. But, this piece was good because it was a different scene than I'm used to doing. And, I say it again and again. It's good to get out of your comfort zone on, what you're painting. And, it's all fine and dandy to just keep painting the same thing over and over again. But it's better to try something new and something slightly different, something that's harder. And this one I found was harder. It was, I've told you before, I've painted a long time. It's been my whole life career of painting and selling art. And, you know, it's a challenge. I think every time I paint, some come easier than others, but this one really got to me on the challenge. And in the end, I made it work. So here I go. You can see where I'm adding darker tones, thinking that might help with my dilemma on the quote-unquote island of marsh there, of grasses. And again, we'll see if what that does. The problem I was finding is that, I kept putting darker down and then it would dry lighter, and it just wasn't satisfying that angst I had with what was it about this piece that wasn't satisfying my visual. So I kept going, and it wasn't the answer wasn't to just keep going darker. The answer was to step back, take a minute, look at the piece, flip it around, let it dry completely, and then come on back in. But I learned from the piece, and it's fun to look at it in a video. Man, it's helpful to do that and to talk about it, because as I'm talking about it and looking at it and editing this piece, I'm realizing, what I was trying to do here. And I honestly went in the wrong direction. I should have lightened it up as opposed to darken it. And that's what I'll end up doing at the end, is just going over the whole piece, the whole foreground, with a lighter opaque tan. And that will satisfy my visual on this piece. I go into the sky, again, trying to exaggerate the moon and settle it in there and not look like it's on top of the sky, but nestled into the sky. And that little bit of dark seemed to help that. And here I go again, trying to add more grasses, because maybe that'll satisfy me. So here's where I decide I'm just not happy. I go in with a complete wash of water. I'm going to rub out what I can, and I just decide that's it. I'm going in with an opaque tan. I'm going to soften this thing and just make it a gentler piece. That it was too many lines going vertically. I just didn't care for it. And this helped me and pleased me with the painting. Still had the accent of the grasses, but this just made it better for me. I hope you like this. I hope you learn with me. I hope to see you on my next painting. And if you like what I'm doing, please comment, like, and subscribe. I'd love to carry on with you on this journey. You have a great day, and I hope this piece helped you or inspired you to want to go paint.